again, YouTube. It's Petey Two Finger, and today we are going to be talking about something a little lighter than yesterday. Today is the 15th. The anniversary of Disco Demolition is the 12th, so I'm a little late. But I was unavoidably detained. So, Disco Demolition Night was a Major League Baseball promotion on the 12th, 1979 at Comiskey Park that ended with a riot. The game was it was a double header, so that means two games. It's the White Sox and the Detroit Tigers. So, the story behind this, I'm going to go off the script because I kind of know it. I was a fan of Steve Dahl, and I still am. I've met him. He's a gentleman. He's a wonderful guy. Really funny. One of the first, if not the first, shock jock, they call him. He's just a really funny guy, and he's been a part of the Chicago radio scene going back to maybe 78, 77. I'm not sure. Him and his partner Gary would do this thing where they would play a disco song and then they would drag the needle across it and then they would make a explosion sound effect in the mix and comment that blowed up real good. This was their joke that they did. He did a song which was a parody of Do You Think I'm Rod Stewart's song. It was Do You Think I'm Disco? And at the end, he had a band and he would perform live in bars. And at the end of that song, it would kind of modulate. It would change keys and it would change from disco to a rock style. And he would be like, I traded I sold my white leisure suit and I got a Trans Am with some 6x9 speakers and I'm playing Boston or something, If you haven't heard it, it's worth your time. It's funny. So they came up with this promotion. I believe that the Vec, he's the peg leg. He's a war veteran and he's missing his leg from the war, and so he came to Steve and suggested this promotional event where if you brought a disco record, you could enter Comiskey Park for 98 cents. Now, that's the loop. It's 97.9. So, 39 people were arrested. And they canceled the second game. Basically, an incredible amount of people. Some people claim that 70,000 people were there. Some people claim it was the greatest night as far as people in that park. That they never had more people in that park than that night. It wouldn't surprise me. The other one, just as a side note, if this type of stuff interests you, you should look into the 10-cent beer night. I believe that was Ohio, Cleveland, Indians game that turned into kind of a riot when I think they ran out of beer or stopped serving beer. And it's worth looking into, but we're here talking about Disco Demolition. So they finished the first game. People have been throwing disco records out onto the playing field. There was a keg of beer in every aisle, and the stench of marijuana was absolutely overwhelming. Steve Dahl proceeds to take the field. He comes out in a Jeep, dressed like a general, and he's got a military helmet on. He gives a few words, whips the crowd into a frenzy, and then the explosives went off, which was, I guess, quite a bit of explosives, and it did damage the field, and the records went flying all over. So pretty much immediately after this, I guess Steve Dahl did a lap around the field where they were throwing cherry bombs and beers at him, and then The White Sox pitcher came out to practice throwing, and I don't even know which way they're going here. I'm such not a fan of organized sports. And one kid came running out, slid into second base, picked up that base, and started waving it around, and that's kicked off what we see here, which is uh, they just completely destroyed. They were on the field for 40 minutes before the Chicago police arrived. So in the middle of that, look at these kids here. These pictures, there's these pictures are great, and there is look at the amount of people on this field. There's a book, there's a 1 hour long documentary, and there's plenty of shorter documentaries, 10 and 15-minute offerings. That's an official image, how that's that font. That's the official font. Here he is with his helmet on. Now, I did not go. I wanted to be there so bad. I I cannot tell you how bad I wanted to go. Um, my neighbors, the famous Steppe brothers, I remember their father taking. I believe all of them went. I don't think Mrs. Steppe went, and I'm not sure if Kyle, the younger one, went. I wouldn't see why not, but they all went down to the city for disco demolition. And the next day, uh, I ran over to the Steppe's house as soon as it was appropriate and wanted to get the skinny on what had happened because I watched it on the news. I watched it. Uh, I remember I knew what happened, and because I mean it was a huge story, and they had literally destroyed the field. Here, poor Harry Carey. Holy cow! He actually sang "Take Me Out to the Ball Game," trying to get and they have a soxogram. It's called, and it's a digital board where they could crudely display messages. It looked like it was made out of light bulbs, and that one said. Please kindly return to your seats. For 40 minutes they were out there. And I heard one report of the stench of marijuana. This is Lorelei. She was the Loop girl. And she used to appear in advertisements where she would lip sync and kind of writhe around. Here's Steve Dahl. National treasure. This guy, he's just absolutely hilarious. My favorite radio guy of all time. I like Kevin Matthews a lot, but yeah, recently they had a exhibit at the Elmhurst Historical Museum, and my wife and I went, and it was a disco demolition exhibit, and so. I photographed everything in that. I've got pictures of everything, you know, where you can read all of the text and everything. So I captured that. So more recently, oh, well, I guess I should tell you about when I went over to the Steppe's house and saw Steve. Steve gave me the lowdown and the play by play and told me about how the incredible amount of people that were there and how it turned into this riot. And it was just They wanted to go out onto the field, and their father wouldn't let them. And of course, the second game was canceled. So Mr. Steppe was upset about that. That was the takeaway. There was that it really got out of control, and it wasn't in the spirit of how you behave at a sporting event. You know. So then you have this, ugly disco demolition night. Rob Halford recalls xenophobic disco. So, of course, and Steve Dahl never apologized. Which, don't be a duck, a disco duck. Now, the article that I read today quoted Steve Dahl, and he apologized. His quote, and forgive me if I butcher this, was, "If I hurt anyone, I'm sorry for that." Yeah. Steve Dahl was blamed for the chaos, the canceled game, and the forfeit. Um, all he did was put butts in the seats and get his name out there. So, more recently, as things have changed and we're getting away from racism, homophobia is not being tolerated like it used to. Um, these types of discussions about disco demolition uh, keep pointing at Steve Dahl as the bad guy, and that this was malicious, and that it was all in a spirit of racism, um, and like white supremacy. And I gotta tell you, I was a fan. I was a kid, and how I perceived it was that he was making fun of the fucking Bee Gees. I had no idea that this was the music of the gay Latino community in New York. And I don't think Steve Dahl was hip to that fact either. When people like us became aware of disco, it was the homogenized Saturday Night Fever, which was John Travolta, who happens to be Caucasian. And if you look here, the demographic was predominantly white, heterosexual, urban, and suburban middle class. And this is the disco that Steve Dahl was reacting against. He was not reacting against the Latino and black. And I see these people of color and of different lifestyles saying how much they were hurt and offended by it. And I'm just here to tell you that I was a fan of that when I was a kid. I was not a fan of the disco stuff. I thought that it was just over the top. The white suits and the dancing and the posing and all that just was something that I realized that if I was at that age, this would not be for me. I would never put on one of those suits and go and strut my stuff at the discotheque. And I mean, Frank Zappa spoke out against this as well in his "Dancing Fool" song. So, it's this type of thing when like the Seattle sound and grunge, it got so big. I remember my brother making a joke about seeing an advertisement where it said "grunge back to school," and they had little kids in flannel going back to school looking like heroin chic. And that type of stuff, when it gets out of the hands of the artists who created it, and it becomes a watered down, commercialized bastardization of what their original concept. And I think that's really what Steve Dahl was attacking. So if you're a house music fan or a disco fan and you're watching this, please understand. I was I was young, so I was born in '67. So I was 13, and I was a fan of the. Wait, how old would I have been? Um, 11. I was 11 or 12. Let's see. Disco Demolition was 79, so I was 12. So, as a fan of Steve Dahl, and I listened to him every day, I would come home from school and put the radio on and listen to him in my bedroom every day. And I listened to Steve Dahl religiously when he was on the air up until the very end. You know, maybe the last couple of years I lost track of him, but I've listened to an overwhelming amount of Steve Dahl radio, and I'm here to tell you he's just a funny guy, and going he was not going after uh, the homosexual Latino crew or African American disco. He was going after the predominantly white heterosexual urban suburban middle class disco. Okay? And he apologized. So my take on it is no. Disco Demolition was not xenophobic. Okay, you guys, I'd encourage you to take a look at this. Don't take my word for it. Take a look at the actual historical records of this, or watch that hour-long documentary. Anyway, take care of yourselves, hug your pets, and peace.